Yes. Okay. Oh, sorry. I clicked the record button, but our standing item is should we record the meeting or use Chatham House rules for this one? Looking at the agenda, it doesn't look like there's anything particularly
Chatham.
yeah, particularly, I don't know, sensitive. So if everybody's okay, I'll leave the recording on. If at any point we want to have a discussion that's more sensitive, then we can turn the recording back off. That's totally cool too. Are you okay with that, Natalie? Because you've got something on the agenda. Okay, cool. Um, I like to record it kind of by default because for the people that miss it, they can catch up. So it's always nice when we can. Okay. I wanted to just start with a quick Open Source Summit EU debrief. Who attended the Open Source Summit in Amsterdam last week? Okay, maybe just
Nobody.
as I was looking around, I was realizing that I didn't think I'd actually seen any of you there. So it was it was an open source summit, so it was lots of really interesting talks. I had a panel with Ruth from Chaos Africa and Leslie Hawthorne from Red Hat, along with Stephen Wally from Microsoft. And we talked about educating the next generation of open source contributors. So I thought that panel went really, really well. I had asked a couple of intro questions and then the audience took over with questions, which is always a good sign, I think for our panel. The other talk I had was about rug pulls in open source projects, so the relicensing, forks, that sort of thing, which I've talked about before at conferences, but this was a slightly different take on it. It's similar to what I presented at Fossey. But there were some other really interesting talks. Ava Black and Hazel Weekly gave a talk about the role of succession planning in open source, and they were, talking about, making more space for other people to lead. How do you make sure that your project succeeds after you roll off of it? I thought that was a particularly interesting talk. And being in Europe, there were a lot of talks around digital sovereignty, funding for open source, including a panel where they were talking about how the OFE has put together a proposal for kind of a sovereign tech fund. So there's a sovereign tech fund in Germany, and they're talking about a proposal to replicate that for the rest of the EU. It's not yet funded, but I thought that was pretty interesting. But the videos will be out in a couple of weeks, so I would say keep an eye out for those. I don't know if anybody else has anything.
Don, I'm just curious
Yeah.
from a perspective of an attendee, how well populated was this conference? And you go to a lot of conferences. Do you see that there has been a resurgence in conference attendance post-COVID? I know that obviously we didn't have attendees and conferences during that period of time, and then I think there was a slow on ramp, but we're now kind of, normal, back to normal. I mean, COVID is still a thing, but it seems to be a manageable thing now for most people, or it's a flu and people get that all the time. So I'm just curious, are conferences well populated again, or do you think there's still a dip?
No, I would say that we've recovered from that particular dip. And in particular, the EU conferences are very well attended. What we're seeing is then the US-based conferences are not getting the attendance that they expected, primarily because people aren't necessarily willing to travel to the US from outside at this point. So, but in a lot of cases, like KubeCon EU, for example, is always larger than KubeCon North America. So that one in particular, the EU one has been larger than the North America one for quite a while. And I haven't seen the numbers specifically or asked Angela, but I suspect that the Open Source Summit EU is also bigger than the Open Source Summit North America. I don't know that for
I'm
sure. It certainly
okay.
seemed bigger than Denver. Denver was pretty sparsely attended.
And I'm also wondering if just budget cutbacks are influencing that. Is that not as much an issue in Europe? Is it just easier to travel around in Europe than
It is so much less expensive to travel in Europe
okay.
from within Europe. We have ridiculously cheap flights that go just about anywhere. And I took a train from the UK to Amsterdam, for example. I didn't have to take a flight at all. So yeah, so travel in the yeah, in Europe is much less expensive. I mean, the hotels are still expensive, but
Yeah. I mean, I organize a bunch of academic conferences in my field, and the Europeans simply do not want to come to the United States, period. Like,
yeah.
if they can avoid it, my European colleagues stay out of my country right now.
Yeah, and a lot of companies have actually put travel bans on travel to the US,
Mhm.
European companies. I know one person who works at a company that's yeah, they have a lot of people based in the EU and they're not allowed to travel to the US right now for work.
Wow. Okay. I was just curious what
Yeah.
that scene was because I'm only really able to attend conferences that are pretty local that I can get to by train, although I made an exception for Denver.
You could have gotten to Denver by train if you had a couple days each way.
I'll keep that in mind.
Hmm.
I heard a rumor that the Linux Summit might be in Chicago next year. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not,
That would be
That
great.
would be, I love Chicago. Bring it.
but
I
that's a
know
long
that I do
train
know that
ride.
Open Source Summit North America is going to be in Minneapolis next year.
Oh,
That's
oh, it's
also
been
close.
confirmed.
Equally
Yeah.
delicious food.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know that they might be there. I'm sure they're planning for the following year. So I wonder if that's what you've heard. I wonder if it's not next year, but the year after.
Yeah. You're
Hmm.
just
It was
always
a
ahead,
total
Ria.
rumor, so I
Yeah.
did not realize that they had actually confirmed the place. So thanks for that information. Now I can get that in my calendar.
Yeah. I'm excited. I went to Minneapolis once and I really liked it. I'm excited to go back. There's a huge tech community in
Yeah.
Minneapolis.
I
Yeah.
lived there for
Yes.
Pretty
six
cool.
years. It's a fantastic tech scene.
Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going. Damien, do you want to spend just a minute or two talking about the new package metadata working group and the meeting you had yesterday?
Okay, sure. So we started a new working group. Initially, we were having private conversations as a small group with Andrew Nesbitt, Enoch, Sean. Uh, yeah. For everything started with CHAOSScon NA. All the conversation, we keep the conversation alive. We talk with people in other places. And we decided to create this working group where we are doing some analysis on how package managers manage its own metadata and how that metadata is exposed to be used by tools like SCA or um, SBOM generators and all the tools that live from that metadata. In particular for Chaos is the metadata we extract to understand communities. And the thing we are doing is we are looking into 36 repositories right now, package managers, not repositories, how all this metadata is defined. We are looking for the specifications, the differences, how they map into information that is required, for example, for SPDX bombs, and understanding if what they have is automatically transformable into what they need for SPDX. And identifying the gap, we want to start making later suggestions to some package managers on maybe if you add this little attribute here, you are getting us all closer to get compliant with SBOM mandates or CRA or stuff like that. We're still trying to work on the putting everything in words of what we're actually doing because we just started yesterday. My first action item from yesterday is actually writing something to put in the repository. So every time I explain it a little different, and I'm trying out what I'm going to say eventually, fix it, but that's kind of a map of where we are.
Awesome. Thanks, Damien. Anyone have any questions about that? Okay. All right. So the next thing we have on the agenda is the CMS OSPO. Natalia, do you want me to stop sharing so you can share?
Yes, I do want us to take over the screen share.
Perfect.
Let's see. Okay, cool. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Hi guys, my name is Natalia. If you don't know me, I'm one of the software engineers in the CMS OSPO, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services OSPO. And today I wanted to show you one of the things we've been working on in the summer, which is a landing page for one of our main tools called Repo Scaffolder. So there are three kind of components that center around the way that we outbound repositories in our agency. So we have our maturity model framework, repository templates that project teams can build on top of, and then an outbound review process where we release the project as open source. So we've had these like three components, but we wanted to kind of create some sort of way to tie them all together and kind of improve the storytelling as we kind of socialize this into the agency. So we created a landing page for our tool that I wanted to share. So here's how it looks like. And then here, it really just ties in together these three components. So we have our maturity model framework with our 5 tiers of maturity. We have this quiz that allows project teams to identify what tier their project falls under. Then after that, point to our repository templates, which show what files are required for each tier. And they can use Cookie Cutter to create those repository templates and build their projects out of. And then afterwards, we have our outbound checklist, which lists the steps. And then so as a way to kind of tie this all together, we have this section called How a Repository Becomes Published. And it kind of walks through the steps of how a project team who's interested in open sourcing their repository would go about our outbounding the repository. So first identifying their maturity model tier through the quiz, then they set up the repo using Repo Scaffolder, our tool, which utilizes Cookie Cutter. And finally, they can follow our outbound checklist, and then the project is ready to be released as open source. Yeah, so these are things that we've shown off in the past to this working group. So just wanted to show that we were able to tie it all together through this landing page. Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
this is really great. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
showing us that. I know I've had conversations either with Isaac or Remy about the challenge in actually getting people to use some of this stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think like having it all in one place and having, sort of walking them through with checklists and checkboxes, I think that's fantastic.
Oh yeah, 1000%. It's helped greatly with with our training, especially when we like meet with these other project teams and we're starting and they're interested in outbounding. So now instead of just writing paragraphs and paragraphs of what to do, we just send this over and they can take it from there. So it's been super helpful.
That's great. And Chris, you've got a question.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you because I discovered Repo Scaffolder a few months ago, and I'm
Oh,
actually
no way.
including some of the concepts, at least as far as like tiering and everything else, customized for my organization, of course,
Of
but
course, yeah.
super helpful. Like for as somebody standing up in OSPO this year, very, very helpful. And like the policy and templates and everything else that'll come out of that here will drive us into the future. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, that makes me so happy to hear. I'm glad that this has been helpful. And yeah, if you want to talk shop more about this type of stuff, feel free to reach out.
Will do. Thank you.
I'm just scanning through the website that you have here, and this is just so neatly and cleanly presented. It's
I'm glad.
really beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you, Ria. Thank you.
Laura, you've got a question. Oops, you're on mute.
Hey, Natalia. Sorry, I don't have my camera on right now. We met at UC Open this year in April.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah.
In
Hi.
Santa Clara. Yes.
Yeah,
Hi,
yeah,
nice to
yeah.
see you again. Oh my
You
gosh.
too. And I actually had checked out Repo Scaffolder earlier because Remy was talking about it in New York in June. And what I'm wondering is, do you get people bulking at needing to install extra tools? Like I think people need to install definitely Cookie Cutter and maybe also Repo Finder. Do people
Yes.
mind?
Let's see. So I think for the technical folks, it's been a pretty easy process for them to do that. We actually just
Mhm.
recently implemented repository templates through GitHub. So that's another way that people can just fork and easily like use our templates. So that's a new way of going about it. And then we also recommend tools to be used in our outbounding process when we go through some security checks. And we provide a lot of the functionality through GitHub Actions. So it's very GitHub centric right now, but that's one of the ways that we can help users use those tools without having to download or
Mhm.
install. Mhm.
Do you
Okay.
have a
Cool.
tutorial on using Cookie Cutter available anywhere in the repo or the website?
Yes.
I haven't gone through everything yet, so
Yeah, no worries. I can send you the docs for that right now. Mhm.
awesome.
I'm putting together templates for the UC right now, and I've looked at Cookie Cutter like 3 or 4 times, and every single time I'm like, I don't know if people are gonna get mad about having to do Cookie Cutter, and like, does Cookie Cutter also depend on Python?
It does, yeah.
That's what I
Mhm.
thought, and I was like, so if I've got somebody coming to me with like a JavaScript based repo, how many tools am I going to ask them? How many tools will they indulge me in installing in order to use my templates? And I started to think it might not be greater than 0. So
Oh, true. Okay.
yeah,
No,
so I'm
that's super
definitely going to check
valid.
out the GitHub templates too. Thank you, because I didn't know that
Yeah.
they started doing this.
Yeah. Now that I realize I didn't actually point to the templates in the repo scaffolder documentation, so I'm going to add that in right now. But I sent one of our templates in chat. So
Thank you.
Cool. Sean.
I think Natalia, am I right from listening to you and Remy talk about this in other contexts that really this is intended to be lightweight to add to a repo? Like there's like like you were talking, there's just a templated GitHub action. So like your node programmers don't need to understand a thing about Python. It can just be
that's true.
configured as a GitHub action. And I think the other thing that's interesting is like I think you all have some capacity to say, hey, why don't you do this and make it a strong suggestion rather than a requirement. Like it seems like your strategy has been like to win the hearts and minds of the projects a little bit, as opposed to
Yeah.
being like a hammer.
Yeah.
You
So if
must put
you
this on
decide
your
to use our
repo.
templates,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. If you decide to use our templates, you have so many additional functionality that'll help with like the maintenance of the repository if you opt in. So that's kind of how we try to socialize it into the agency and have people opt in.
Any other questions for Natalia?
Have you done any presentations on this where you've demoed it that are recorded anywhere, Natalia?
Ooh, yes. I think we first shared this with the community back in what was it, Open Source Summit in 2024, but we've made significant progress since then, but I can send over the presentation to show you how it works. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Yes, of course.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys, for the feedback.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for bringing it back to present it. It's really great just to see the progress that you all have made on this. It's been yeah, it's great. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, I'm glad to see Chris here. OKRs and KPIs for OSPOs. So this was a question that Chris, you asked in a Slack thread, which I've linked to, but we'll probably open in Slack. Maybe not. Okay, well, it's not gonna show me this in the web browser, so you have to click on it on your own if you want to see the Slack thread. But oh no, there we go. Sorry, I'm just failing to read instructions. Nope. Okay.
Well, the instructions
It doesn't
likely
like that.
changed for all these tools in the last week.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up in my Slack app so I can look at it. But the question was if anybody's done OKRs and KPIs for their OSPOs before, and Chris was hoping to get some insights from those who've been working in OSPOs for a bit longer. So I don't know, Chris, if you have some more context
Yeah.
you want to provide.
So, as I mentioned in the previous discussion, like I'm standing up a brand new OSPO from scratch. I've never really done this before, but I'm very knowledgeable in what OSPOs do and how they do it. So, yeah, any kind of insights that you provide or give to your, organizational planning folks would be very helpful. But aside from that, I really don't know what to say right now. I think part of it is like metric driven, but the other part of it is definitely like making the subjective more objective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of start. When I was so I worked in VMware's OSPO most recently before working at more full time as part of CHAOSS. And most of our most so we did have OKRs and KPIs for the open source program office, and they were generally tied kind of directly back to what it was that we were trying to do as an organization. So we worked within the office of the CTO. So a lot of our OKRs were tied to things that the office of the CTO cared about. So we had OKRs certainly around compliance and security. So basically protecting the company against people doing things that they shouldn't be doing within open source, and we had tooling around that to help with that. I think we had some OKRs around working with business units and helping them understand how to work within open source communities. So we had some OKRs. We had some OKRs around that as well. Um, And then we also had some OKRs around presenting at conferences and blog posts and sharing the work that we do more broadly, because as a company, the more your people are out there talking about what you do in open source, the easier it can be to recruit people. So that was not directly a recruiting message, but it was partly promoting VMware as a good open source citizen, but then also making it easier for us to recruit people, because we were hiring, I think, Kubernetes contributors and, people to work in some of the upstream open source projects that we were involved in. Damien.
Yeah, I just wanted to share. This is something that is in the To-Do OSPO book, but when you are starting, the OKRs are basically linked to what or who is the problem that made the OSPO exist. Like, as the OSPO grows and you have more people, you can focus on many things, but initially it's like self-dictated. It's like if the OSPO was created because legal wanted someone to look into licenses, probably that's the OKR number one. And if you were created by a community organization, then probably you need to go to conferences. And if you were created by the development department, you're trying to hire. So you want to work on having good repositories and good interactions and that kind of stuff. The first thing I will look is who is the reason you exist when you are small. After you grow, you need to reach to everything else. But if you are 2, 3 persons, or even one,
Yeah.
then the key is why you exist has a name.
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you for that. That's very valid. Yeah. Good point.
both Damien and Don touched on this, but Don mentioned her OSPO rolled up to the office of the CTO, whereas Damien mentioned the legal. I think it's really critical to ensure that you're aligning with whatever the goals of the organization that you sit in are. Now, that being said, there's still cross-functional relationships that figuring out what the business goals are and then how do you fit into those business goals within your corner of the world and how you can bring value add, because ultimately the business wants to succeed and they've got a path to do that. Now, how does open source fit into that path? And then that might reveal some potential measures that you could monitor and report on.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I linked to this practitioner guide for demonstrating organizational value is it because it leans pretty heavily into aligning the work of your OSPO with the broader work that the organization is trying to do, and some ways to talk about that in ways that your executives are more likely to understand and to resonate with them, because I feel like, and I've seen this in lots of OSPOs. I've seen so many people measure things that are, easy to count, or
Mm-hmm.
that sound like charity. We're doing this for the good of the community. You hear engineers say that, but you say that to the wrong executive, and it's a really good
Yep.
way to get your whole open source program, chopped in half, because executives need and leadership need to understand how what you're doing serves the needs of the business. And you can still do that giving back to the community, but that's not how you describe it when you're talking to your
Mm-hmm.
organization's leadership. You talk about it in terms of, functionality that you need, or, license compliance from a legal standpoint. There's lots of ways to demonstrate that value, but the guide kind of walks through some of the options. So that might be
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'll go through that. I know when I first joined, I saw the practitioner guides and read through a couple of them, but this one I need to go through again, I think.
This one's brand new, and it's based on some of the presentations that Bob Killen gave,
Oh,
and it's
nice.
based
Okay.
on the work that Bob did when he was still at Google in justifying the work to Google executives. So that guide's pretty. I think the guide is pretty solid. I helped him write it into a guide, but I don't know, 75 to 90% of the guide is based on stuff that Bob did.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, Bob sent me a video link in his slides, and, that only gets you so far.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so this tried to kind of tie all of that together because it was excellent presentation.
Oh, yeah. No, 100% agree. Excellent presentation.
Yeah.
I need to go back and watch that too. Now that I
One
kind
of
of
the
have.
first things I'm scanning through Don's guide, and one of the first things and lessons learned is what is the criticality of the open source projects the organization is helping to maintain? Well, what are the critical projects that your company depends on, even if they're not maintaining them? And maybe that's a path to
Yeah.
say, we need to be engaged in these projects because they are parts of our critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the guide is based on helping you set priorities based on a combination of criticality and project health risk. So if you've got a critical project that is super healthy and wonderful, and has all the features you need, maybe you spend less time on that and more time on another critical project, which is maybe missing a feature and isn't as healthy as you would like, and so it talks about prioritizing the work using criticality and project health risk, because ultimately, most of us working in OSPOs it all comes down to prioritization because you're using a bajillion open source software packages and you can't possibly contribute to all of them or focus on all of them or pay attention to all of them. And so it's figuring out which ones are important for you. When I was at VMware, I maintained a list of what we called the strategic projects. So we had
Mm-hmm.
a strategic projects list for the third-party projects that were really important to us, and we had a strategic list of our own projects that were most important for us. And the idea was that those were our critical projects. Those were the ones that it was just explained differently, but those were the ones that we had people contributing upstream into. Those were the ones that we had teams working on internally within VMware.
Yeah, sometime when we're in person, Dawn, I'll tell you the story here so far because I think you would find it very interesting.
Yeah, I'd be happy to chat about that.
Yeah.
Also, check, depending your company, but check if there is other teams that already have that information, like
Mhm.
InfoSec, legal. There might be different teams that already did that research for you. Because if the company was working before an OSPO and they needed that, they have it.
Yeah. Yeah, my company organization is interesting because we have open source projects that are also products and vice versa, right? Like products that are more open source project than actual products. So, um, right now I have taken the route of, oh, I, I know revenue numbers. Okay, this one thing does X percentage, it's a majority, and I'm going to focus there first. And that has worked so far. But yeah, when it comes time to plan things for 2026, I want to be able to say, like, here's our OKRs, here's our KPIs, and, not kind of be in this new OSPO kind of state, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you should think about as an OSPO is not how much money they bring sometimes,
Right.
but how much money you lose as a risk
Mm,
if they go away. Because it's easy to say like, oh, this is the most valuable product, but there is also the case where one of those is not that valuable, but if something goes bad legally, it's really expensive.
yeah.
And you're working on compliance as part of the job, so
Hmm.
you can really link that together.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that the person leading our OSPO kind of talked about was that we haven't been sued by anybody for license violations. And
Hmm.
that's really hard to articulate, right? Because
Yeah.
we're doing everything right, and no one's trying to sue us for lots of money. It was a little easier to do at VMware because someone had sued us for lots of money for
Oh, okay.
yeah, well, if you go back in time, so it's Christoph Helvig brought a suit against VMware in Germany
Uh,
for violating the terms of the license related to code that he had written in the Linux kernel. So
oh,
you
I
can
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, so you can look that up. It's all public record. We
Hmm.
eventually yeah, VMware yeah, the suit
So
didn't
yeah,
go.
the license compliance thing was a big thing for me when I first joined because there was no tooling there, and I actually helped justify the cost of, another tool to help identify critical dependencies and license and risk and all that other stuff. And, the way I justified it was if it saves us from one lawsuit, it's paid for itself, you know, like
Totally.
5 times over usually too. So yeah, the justification there I think is very good for a corporate environment for sure. Like definitely license compliance is a big deal for us. I need to work through some, organizational structures there too. So it's just interesting the way the company is built, right? Like our engineering teams get kind of fractured once you drill down into them. So like each project has a team, each product overlaps with that team as well. So yeah, it's somewhat siloed too as far as like function of each product. So it's not always cut and dry Like they know who I am, but they don't always have to interact with OSPO to do a good job either because they know what they need to do. So I'm fortunate in that regard.
And where does your OSPO sit organizationally? Do you-
I'm under the CTO, yeah. So CEO, CTO, OSPO, engineering, the whole 9 yards are all right together.
Yeah, I think that helps. I think
Yeah,
my opinion is that the OSPOs belong in the office of the CTO because that's what I've seen work best.
yeah,
Um,
I think it is vitally important there. Yeah.
yeah.
Another area, I don't know if you have a corporate affairs team, but there's a lot of regulatory stuff coming out right now that intersects with OSPOs between, um, well, I'm not really sure where the state is with the US government enforcing 14028 because that seems to be in a little bit of flux right now, but the EU-CRA is coming up. And I think India also has some SBOM guidelines that are rather extensive. So if you've got a corporate affairs team that's intersecting with those regulations or providing advice to the company based on those regulations, how open source can fit into that might be another angle.
Thank you for that.
Especially if you have customers in Europe, because the EU-CRA is going to be quite impactful to that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good point.
Any other final comments before we move on to the next item? Okay, cool. Well, thank you for bringing that up, Chris. I think that was a really interesting topic, and I think it's one that we should continue to talk about because it's something that OSPOs struggle with, and
Hmm.
it's a particularly important right now, just given the state of of the economy and trying to keep OSPOs running within organizations and funded. I think these are important conversations to have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing I wanted to just see if anybody had any ideas for future presentations. So are there topics that you would like to see us bring into this meeting? Are there people you'd like to see present? Does anyone have any ideas, thoughts?
Well, since Natalie said that their last demo of Cookie Cutter was from 2024 and it's had lots of advancements, I'd love a new demo. Sorry,
For
Natalie, I'm going to
sure.
put you on the spot.
Oh no, for sure. That's what I'm here for. Yeah, I would be happy to do any demos of the tools that the CMS OSPO has built. We've been doing a lot this past year, so.
Cool.
I was going to ask a similar question of Natalia. I wondered if it would be helpful to y'all to do like I mean, it could be like a live stream or just a recording, but of me, who hasn't used the project before, getting started with it and like going through the process of using it for uh, just I have found like having uh, getting to watch somebody use it for the first time who hasn't seen it inside out can find stuff that isn't clear or stuff that doesn't like isn't as intuitive to people outside of the project as we might have thought. And that could serve as not exactly a tutorial, but like as maybe a getting started. Like if you're having any troubles getting started, here's a video of somebody overcoming obstacles, or not even recorded. Anyway, is that something you'd be interested in?
Oh yeah, 1000%. I think a new initiative that we recently actually just started is we're doing user research with repo scaffolder with other project teams in the agency. So yeah, and actually going through these sessions has brought up like a lot of assumptions that I personally made. Like for instance, I thought everyone in the agency had a GitHub account, but turns out they never had access to it in the first place. So that's like one documentation. That's one assumption that I realized that like, oh wow, we really have to start from ground zero when having, because there are non-technical folks that are interested in open sourcing, use this tool. So I think a video is actually like one of our ideas that we have. So yes, that is in the works. And yeah, would be happy to show you how it works as well too.
Cool, thank you.
Any other topics people would like to see us bring into the meeting? Okay. Also, if you think of anything, just don't hesitate to drop it in the OSPO working group channel, and we can work on it asynchronously as well if you think of any topics that would be good to have.
I hesitate to ask this. I don't know if you've done this before, but GitHub tutorials, and I have always been legal adjacent, so working in an OSPO is a relatively new term for me. But trying to deal with GitHub, I've managed to munge together enough techniques that I can kind of limp through it, but I wouldn't call myself an expert, and I always generally feel like I'm a little lost when I'm trying to do things.
Yeah,
That
that's a really
lost feeling's not a good one.
And that's a really good point because it's something that I mean, let's face it, GitHub is not intuitive to people who have never seen it before. This
Nope.
whole idea of you do a commit and then you put it in a pull request and then someone else takes that thing and does a thing with it is really not intuitive. Really to anybody the first time they've seen it, developers included. Maybe it's a little more intuitive to developers because they're, might be familiar with other types of source code uh, control systems. But yeah, and and I know lots of people who work in OSPOs who frankly never touch GitHub, despite the fact that a lot of our stuff
Yeah.
is built on GitHub. But I know loads of people who work in OSPOs who don't use GitHub. Because you
Hmm.
don't necessarily have to in order to do things like, manage the compliance processes and you can have engineers do the GitHub-y bits and as long as, the process is good and yeah.
Oh, okay. I assumed when you started talking, Dawn, that what you were saying was some OSPOs aren't using GitHub because they're using GitLab or Gitpod or whatever. But you
No,
actually
I'm
are
talking
not
about
using anything of the sort.
yeah. So the OSPOs are probably using so the companies are probably using GitHub or GitLab,
Mm.
one or the other. There's still a few using Perforce. But my point is there are lots of employees who work in OSPOs who never touch GitHub.
Oh,
Because I've seen these people. And
Uh,
it's not a bad thing. Like
No.
yeah, yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to know how to use GitHub to do um to do a lot of stuff within an open source program office. One of the people who worked for me, she had never really used GitHub, and she was talking about, that she wanted to. There was something small that needed to be fixed, and I said, well, let's just do that. I'm going to walk you through how to make a pull request.
Mhm.
And yeah, so there are just a lot of OSPO people working in OSPOs who aren't that familiar with GitHub.
And
Yeah.
maybe some of the other tooling too. I mean, Laura mentioned GitLab. I've never touched GitLab before. I don't really have a particular reason to, but maybe it would be. I'm often surprised at how there's something out there that I've never touched before and think, well, that's not really relevant to my day job. And then a week later, it suddenly becomes relevant in some
Hmm.
critical sort of fashion. It's like there's something in the air. But that would be potentially a broader subject to cover, just tooling in an OSPO or tools to using your OSPO. Even with GitHub, I use TortoiseGit, and I find that just about as inexplicable and difficult. And I've searched for wikis and docs on using that. And again, I've managed to figure out how to munge my way through accomplishing what I need to accomplish, but I definitely don't feel comfortable with using some of this tooling, and maybe there's something better out there that I should be using that would make this whole process easier that I'm just not aware of.
Yeah, when it comes to GitLab, I know far less about GitLab than I do GitHub because most of the projects I've worked on over the past 10 years have been in GitHub. But we use GitLab here, and it's like, oh, do other open source projects use GitLab like as their public facing thing? Yes, very much yes. And, I don't know the organizational structure, how teams work, the APIs are completely different. Everything's different. So I would welcome any kind of training for GitLab or GitHub.
Yeah, every time I'm faced with GitLab, which we did our when I was at VMware, our internal projects were in GitLab.
Mhm.
And I just found it mystifying. Like I just didn't know how it worked. I was able to get stuff into it and do a merge request, and that was all I could
Yeah.
Yeah.
start
It's a
over.
different mental model for sure.
Right. That's the biggest thing for me is like
Yeah.
it's the same stuff. It's just very much different.
It's just
Yeah.
organized differently. Like I just found
Hmm.
myself not being able to find the things that I think I should
Yeah.
find.
I have the same challenges. I got to run to another meeting, but thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Yeah, so it's not just you. It's all confusing. Okay, one quick reminder, we're out of time. There's a digital resilience forum in Madrid on October 29th. It's being organized by Bitergia, and it's all around kind of digital sovereignty and sustainability of open source projects. So if you have any folks working on your teams in and around Europe, for which Madrid would be an easy trip. It's a free event to attend. We're just really interested in getting people who are interested in these topics together to have some interesting conversations. So I just wanted to mention that here.
There's another topic that I think might be helpful to people, or right now I don't have a huge travel budget, so it may not be as relevant, but having a clearinghouse of open source conferences, you can go to the Linux Foundation and find out all their conferences, but I participate in different groups and I get, oh, there's this conference for this thing and there's that conference for
Hmm.
that other thing, depending on which group I'm playing in at the moment. But there isn't really a place that I'm aware of where you can go to say, all right, here's the year. And these are all the conferences and places and what you get out of it to actually make a plan for the year. I kind of fly by the seat of my pants on that. I mean, I always look for the Linux Foundation one. That's the main one that I try to prioritize going to. And then I go to Fosse because it's in Portland and that's a train ride away, and Seagull because that's in Seattle, which is a tram ride away. Uh, but I'm not sure that I really have a good handle on the conference landscape across
Yeah.
all of the
Um,
ecosystems and foundations, etc.
yeah, let me ping Divya so Divya Mohan runs the Chaos Asia working group. Or not, it's not a working group, it's a chapter. And I think she was putting something like that together. So let me just reach out to her and see if she has that. But yeah, I've got my list of conferences already for next year. And
So organized.
I keep a list when the CFPs are going to be open because some of the CFPs are opening. Foss Backstage is just getting ready to open their CFP. So yeah, it's something I start working on in August every year. Is my event calendar for the following year so that I can keep track of CFPs and not miss the deadlines.
Oh,
But it's also just, it's not just for me personally. It's also that, if someone's in Madrid and there's a conference going on in Madrid, I want to encourage some of my colleagues to go to those. If that's local for them, that would be great. And being able to give them that list and say, hey, look at this list. If you are in any of these places, especially conferences in India. I know Linux Foundation just had one in India, and I was so surprised to see it because I didn't know they were doing conferences in India. But I imagine there's got to be other open source, and we're a global company, and there's a pretty decently sized contingent of people in India that it'd be great to get them more involved in the open source community for.
Yeah,
yeah. I,
yeah, for
I
sure.
have big old education needs right now for a couple of my folks, so it'd be great to get them up to speed on the boring stuff that I enjoy.
Yeah, actually, you can see this is my plan for next year. These are all the conferences that I'm not necessarily going to go to all of them, but Yeah, it keeps me organized. And then once a month, I have a task list item to look at the CFPs for each of these and see if they're open yet. Because they really, so FOSS Backstage is in March, but the CFP closes the 27th of October, which is just less than 2 months away. So you really gotta be on top of it if you're gonna submit to some of these conferences.
Yeah, Laura, that's the other thing too. The budget issue is just really hard to deal with. And
Mhm.
I mean, I've gone to some conferences before with people I know in Seattle, and we've just split the hotel room just to try and crowd share on some of the costs associated with trying to fund getting to these things. It would be great if there was a magic wand, but educating companies on the value of attending conferences, not just on the value of open source, but the value of attending conferences. I always get something out of a conference. So
Yeah.
that's, but translating that into something that would pry pennies away is a harder lift.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we're weird because we're not a company. And we're funded by grants. And so there's nowhere that we can be like, can I have pennies? It's like, no. You can have this much and then you get as far as you get with that, and that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough right now for travel budgets for sure. Okay, so we're out of time. We were out of time 6 minutes ago, but this was so interesting that I didn't want to cut it off. So thank you, everybody, so much for coming and having such interesting discussions. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for
Awesome.
the new
Thank
time.
Thanks,
y'all.
guys.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
I'm excited to actually get to participate.
I know, it's great. Thanks for coming.